So before we begin, it is recommended that you first watch my review of Eternal Night before watching this one. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the final game in the Legend of Spyro trilogy, The Legend of Spyro: Dawn of the Dragon, which was developed by Entrenched Games and was published by Activision. At least the North American version was anyway. Of all the games, this is the only one I remember seeing advertisements for, which never showed any gameplay and were very short, so I didn't know what to think about it. But after playing through Eternal Night, I decided to move on to this game to see how the series ends. So, is The Legend of Spyro: Dawn of the Dragon worth playing? Okay, so just like before, this segment will contain spoilers to the previous game, so if that bothers you, please skip to the next section. So our story begins with Spyro, Cinder, and Sparks still in the crystal Spyro had sealed them in from the end of the previous game. 3 years have passed and Spyro and Cinder are freed from the crystal by strange monsters called Grumblins, who put these jade magical snakes around Spyro and Cinder's necks, which keeps them tethered together. Upon coming to, they fight off the Grumblins as well as a golem with the help of Hunter the cheetah. Talking with Hunter, they learn about all that has changed since they were sealed away. It turns out that the Grumblins are Malefor's army and have been wreaking havoc on the world. Together they all agreed to head to the Dragon City to meet up with Ignitus and the other Elder Dragons to put an end to this era of darkness. The story this time around is just okay. There are some elements here that I really like the temple that was built in honor of Malefor, who is the first purple dragon, helping the village of the cheetahs, developing a friendship between Spyro and Cinder, and the return of the Elder Dragons. But for the most part, the story feels really rushed with not a lot of thought put into it. I mean, the story is really short and rather underdeveloped in certain areas, for example, the Grumblins. These creatures come completely out of nowhere and feel like these weird replacements for the apes. Plus, the game has an odd Lord of the Rings-like part to it that just didn't work well for me. Character-wise, things are alright. Spyro and Cinder are both likable, and it's nice to see them work together and help each other out. Sparks, Hunter, and Ignitus are good as well. Sure, they are very underdeveloped, but I never found them to be hateable. I just wish there was more to them. Of the three, Ignitus gets more of an arc, which I can appreciate. Malefor is an interesting villain, I just wish they would have developed him more. The game's ending isn't too bad either, it's nothing amazing, but it's a decent way to end the series. The Legend of Spyro: Dawn of the Dragon is an action-adventure game. While there are elements that are similar to the previous game, this one definitely has some greater changes. The elements that remain the same are the gems that will restore health, mana, and give EXP, being able to double jump and glide, and the 4 elemental breaths with 2 attacks. The biggest change in the game is the ability to play as both Spyro and Cinder. In fact, the game even has a 2-player mode. In single player, however, you can easily switch between the 2 characters. Combat is a bit different this time. There is a basic attack and a strong attack, both are just okay. It's kinda hard to tell if you're really hitting an enemy or if your attack is doing much damage to begin with. Now you can grab enemies, which is actually the best way to take out smaller enemies, as well as using your breaths. Spyro still has Fire, Ice, Lightning, and Earth Breath. Fire has its Flamethrower move and its Charge Attack, though this time I would say the Charge Attack is actually more useful than before, and it's an okay element. Lightning Breath is still pretty bad, as it has this Bolt Attack that only targets one enemy at a time, and its Electro Orb Attack is okay at best, but could still be better. Ice is alright, as it has an Ice Shard Attack that will hit multiple enemies and slow them down, and a nice Tornado Attack that's pretty good but really drains your mana. And Earth is It has an okay charge shot that has a usable area of effect, and then there is the Rock Ball attack that can run over enemies, but it's much better to jump first and then use it to ground pound the area. Spyro's breath attacks this time around just aren't that impressive. Cinder, on the other hand, is much better. Because she was exposed to the dark powers, she has her own unique elements. First, she has Poison, which has a charge attack that will spread out after being shot, and a flip attack that's just okay. Her weakest element is Wind, which has a blowing attack that isn't all that great, and a tornado attack that's more useful but also takes a lot of mana to use. Shadow is a really cool element as it has an okay breath attack that can be helpful, and a ground attack that allows her to go under enemies and strike them from below. Finally, we have her best element, Fear. Fear has a pretty powerful scream attack that can leave enemies stunned in fear, and she has his homing Fear Orb attack that really is helpful. Because of this, I often find myself playing as Cinder for most of the game. Now, when fighting enemies, you will fill up a Fury Bar, which once full will give you this powerful laser breath attack, which I only use against boss-like monsters. Gliding has actually become rather useless, since now Spyro and Cinder can fly almost any time. Now, there are some limitations to flying, mostly involving how high they can fly, and there will be areas where they can't fly too, because you will have to reach these areas in different ways. Because of the flying mechanic, there are some levels that are more linear and some that are more open world for exploring. You don't have a charge attack anymore, but instead you get a dodge roll, which is much more faster than walking. However, progressing through levels is all the same, where you will have to fulfill some objectives to continue. These will range from destroying so many objects, solving puzzles, or some platforming. Spyro and Cinder can now pick up objects, activate switches, and open chests. While holding an item, however, you can't fly very well. To make up for this, you can climb up vines, run along special walls, and switch between characters. One other annoying thing is the magic rope that ties Cinder and Spyro together, which will sometimes cause you to fall or not progress because you were too far from each other, something that really gets annoying when playing two-player. To be fair, there are some moments when the rope is used in more interesting ways, like pulling a boat or swinging characters around. Even Spyro and Cinder's elemental breaths are used to get past certain obstacles, like setting fire to vines, shadow sneaking under doors, electrifying switches, and blowing horns. It's nothing super special, but I do like these small touches. Almost all the levels will have objects to collect, like blue gem clusters, which give EXP used to upgrade your elemental breaths, red life crystals, which once you have collected enough, your health will be upgraded, green magic crystals, which will increase your mana once you have collected enough of them, and armor pieces. Armor pieces will give your character some extra buffs, like increasing defense, poison physical attacks, and stronger combat skills. Once you have all 3 pieces of an armor set, you will then get a bonus skill for your character wearing all 3 pieces, which makes them worth getting. There are also these powerful enemies hidden in most of the levels, and beating them really doesn't seem to do much except unlock some bonus art. There are very few boss fights in the game, and as long as you go out of your way to find those decent armor pieces, they really aren't too bad. Of the 3 games, this one to me looks the worst. First off, there's quite a difference in the art style this time, going for more of a realistic style versus a cartoon one. Now, that's not to say that's a bad thing, as there are some environments that look pretty good, and the character models look decent with some alright detail to them. Enemies, on the other hand, look very awful. This could also have something to do with the color scheme used for the enemies. Speaking of colors, the colors this time seem a bit off, making some areas look very less appealing. Voice acting is still good for all characters, especially for Spyro and Ignitus. Christina Ricci does a good job voicing Cinder, who now has more of a speaking role. And once again, Sparks has a different voice actor, that being Wayne Brady. Now, as much as I like Wayne Brady, he is only okay as Sparks, but a part of that could have to do with the writing. The music still has a fantasy feel to it, which for the most part is really good, with some memorable tracks that really stand out, such as the theme that plays during the Valley of Avalar, which is easily my favorite. So, would I recommend playing The Legend of Spyro: Dawn of the Dragon? Not really. It's certainly not a bad game, but it does have its flaws. Don't get me wrong, there are things that I like to this game, such as the new elemental breaths, being able to play as Cinder, some of the story elements, the idea of flying, and the armor pieces are helpful. It's the execution of some of these elements that sucks. I like some of the simple puzzle solving and platforming, but some levels don't complement these very well. Sure, the Valley of Avalar is not only a reference to Spyro 2, but a nice level that also feels a bit too large and is a good example of how the magic rope can get really annoying. And boy, does that magic rope really make those carrying puzzles so much more annoying than they really needed to be. Like I said, the flying is a cool idea, but the later levels that focus on flying are not very well laid out and can get really annoying. And once again, fighting enemies can get rather dull since they have needlessly large health, especially the large ogre-like enemies and the flying enemies that can get really hard to hit. But it's best to use Cinder's Sphere Attack against them. The game isn't awful, it just isn't all that great. At the very least, the game is short, so if you do play it, it shouldn't take too long to beat. In all honesty, the entire Legend of Spyro trilogy isn't worth playing. It was a series that had some really great potential and ideas, but I just don't feel like they really took it to its fullest. And with that, we have taken a look at all the Spyro games for the PS2, and I will admit, it's kinda disappointing to see this many lackluster games in the series. Of the PS2 games, I would still have to say that A Hero's Tale is the one that I like the most. After the Legend of Spyro series, the Spyro name was then used to help sell an all-new series called Skylander. Since then, there hasn't been any Spyro game, or at least a game that actually focuses on Spyro, which is a shame as I would like to see another attempt to a Spyro game. In the meantime, I will just have to stick with the original 3 games since they are some of my favorite platforming games of all time, and not just for the PS1. And with that, this concludes our Spyro Marathon. While I wouldn't say most of the games have been all that great, I hope you all still enjoyed this journey. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this review and found it to be rather informative. If you'd like to see more reviews, please check out my channel. And please don't forget to subscribe. And if there are any other PS2 games you'd like to see me review in the future, please leave a suggestion down below. Well, I'm MCB the PS2 Gamer, and I'll see you guys next time.